My ex got me fired from my dream job. I married the company's heiress. The rain in Boston that October evening wasn't falling, it was being hurled against the 42nd floor windows of Hastings and Lowe, one of the oldest, most prestigious corporate law firms on the East Coast. Inside, the only sounds were the whisper of bespoke wool, the muted clack of keyboards, and the hum of ambition. My ambition. At 29, I, Daniel Thorne, was the youngest associate ever on track for partnership in the Mergers and Acquisitions division. I lived in the details, the hidden clauses in 1,000-page contracts, the subtle leverage in a negotiation. My world was one of precedent and precision, and I was good at it. I had clawed my way up from a scholarship at a public university, through night classes, past the Ivy League legacy hires, by being smarter, harder, and more meticulous than anyone else. My personal life was meant to be a controlled subsidiary of this ambition. For 2 years, that subsidiary was Chloe. Chloe Whitaker was a curator at the Institute of Contemporary Art, all sharp edges, dramatic pronouncements, and a beauty that felt like a challenge. We were a power couple in the making, the rising legal star and the cultural tastemaker. Our relationship was intense, volatile, and, I thought, exciting. It was a merger of two formidable egos. The cracks began when the merger discussions turned serious. Over a tense dinner at her minimalist apartment, she floated the idea of a prenuptial agreement. Not hers idea, she assured me, but her family's. Her family, old Beacon Hill money, viewed my background as a narrative rather than a pedigree. I just think it's practical, Daniel, she said, swirling her wine. To protect what we each bring. My trust, your future earnings. The phrasing was a scalpel. Your future earnings. Not our future. It laid bare the transaction. I, the kid from Worcester who'd studied by library fluorescent lights, was still an outsider being assessed for risk. I need to think about it, I said, my voice tight. A prenup that only protects inherited wealth is one thing. But one that walls off future community property. That doesn't feel like a partnership. It feels like an acquisition. Her eyes flashed. Don't be crude. It's just smart. We are not a balance sheet, Chloe. The conversation devolved. It was our first real fight about money, and it revealed a fundamental schism. She saw security in walls. I saw it in shared foundation. A week later, I ended it. It was civil, cold, and final. Or so I thought. The retaliation was not civil. It was surgical. It began 3 weeks after the breakup. I was deep in the final due diligence for the Carlyle Pharma acquisition, a $12 billion deal that was my proving ground. My direct supervisor, Richard Vail, a partner with the demeanor of a disappointed bloodhound, called me into his corner office. Daniel? Close the door. I did. The air was thick with the scent of old books and older money. A serious matter has been brought to HR, he began, not meeting my eyes. He shuffled papers on his immaculate desk. Allegations of inappropriate conduct. From Chloe Whitaker. I blinked. Inappropriate conduct. What does that mean? Harassment. Following the end of your personal relationship. Persistent, unwanted contact. Creating a hostile environment. My laugh was short, disbelieving. That's absurd. We haven't spoken since we broke up. I've been living at the office on the Carlyle deal. Check my access logs, my Uber receipts. I haven't been within 10 blocks of her apartment or the ICA. Richard held up a hand. She's provided evidence. Text messages. Voicemails. Emails sent from a dummy account she claims is yours. They are disturbing. Threatening, in a veiled, psychological way. A cold dread began to pool in my stomach. They're forgeries. Or taken out of context. Let me see them. Let me explain. The firm cannot risk that, Daniel, he said, his voice dropping to a confidential murmur. Not with our profile. Not with the sensitivities of today. A public accusation, even an unfounded one, from a woman with her social connections, it's a grenade. The managing partners have decided. We're offering you a graceful exit. A severance package, 6 months' salary in exchange for your resignation, and a full non-disparagement agreement. It's generous. Generous. The word was a slap. They were buying my silence, my reputation, my career, for 6 months' pay. They hadn't investigated. They'd calculated risk. And if I don't resign? If I fight this? Richard's face hardened. Then we terminate you for cause. The allegation will become part of your permanent record. We will not provide a reference. And we will defend our decision vigorously. You will be unemployable in this town, Daniel. Take the deal. It's the only play you have. I looked out at the rain-lashed city, the view I'd earned. I thought of the 100-hour weeks, the missed family events, the absolute devotion I'd poured into this firm. They were folding without a fight. Because Chloe's last name carried more weight than my entire body of work. I took the deal. I signed the papers that made me complicit in my own professional assassination. I cleaned out my office at night, like a thief. The news spread through the legal community with viral speed. Whispers in the clubs, headlines in the legal blogs, rising star at HNL exits amidst cloud. The cloud was all anyone saw. My resume, once a golden ticket, was now radioactive. Interviews were cancelled. Headhunters stopped returning calls. The blacklist was real, and it was absolute. For months, I drifted. I lived off the severance in a sublet that smelled of other people's lives. I took temporary document review work, the legal equivalent of ditch digging, in sterile rooms with other disgraced lawyers. The rage was a constant, low-grade fever. Chloe hadn't just broken up with me, she had dismantled the architecture of my life with a few well-placed lies. And Hastings and Lowe, the institution I'd worshipped, had been an eager accomplice. My lowest point was a Wednesday in February. I'd been rejected for an in-house counsel job at a failing tech startup. The HR manager, a kid younger than me, had practically sneered, "We've heard the rumors. We can't have that kind of liability." I walked across the commons, the frozen slush seeping through my worn-out dress shoes, and sat on a bench. The statue of some forgotten dignitary stared past me. I was 29 years old, and I was a ghost. The precision of my world had been used as a weapon against me. I had no play. No precedent to cite. No clause to invoke. That night, my younger sister, Mia, a force of nature in nurses' scrubs, refused to let me wallow. "You're coming with me," she declared, shoving a tie at me. The Boston General Children's Ward benefit. Free food, open bar, and you need to be around people who aren't billing in 6-minute increments. I went, numb and silent, a specter in a room full of light and laughter. I stood near a potted fern, nursing a drink, watching the city's elite perform charity. And then, I saw her. She was arguing good-naturedly with the auctioneer over the description of a donated weekend ski trip to Stowe. "It says luxury chalet, Brian, but the photo clearly shows the condo unit next to the dumpster. That's not luxury, that's false advertising with a fireplace." Her voice was clear, witty, without malice. She had an intelligent, open face, a cascade of dark hair, and wore a simple emerald green dress that spoke of quiet confidence, not ostentatious wealth. She won the argument, getting the description amended, and turned, catching me watching her with a faint, exhausted smile I hadn't worn in months. She walked over. "Sorry. I hate it when they oversell. A dumpster view is a dumpster view. I'm Elena." "Daniel," I said. "And I appreciate the precision. It's a rare commodity. She tilted her head. You sound like you mean that. I do. I'm a lawyer. Or. I was. Was is a heavy word, she said, her eyes holding mine. They were a startling shade of hazel, sharp and kind at once. What happened? Normally, I would have deflected. But the shame had been festering for so long, and her gaze held no judgment, only curiosity. In that crowded room, surrounded by the evidence of my ruin, I told this stranger the truth. The abbreviated, unvarnished truth. The ambition, the breakup, the false allegations, the cowardice of the firm, the blacklist. She listened, completely. Not a glance at her phone, not a polite nod waiting for her turn to speak. When I finished, she was silent for a moment. So they didn't fight for you, she said finally. No. And you have proof it was all fabricated? On my personal devices? Yes. Texts that show the timeline is impossible. Records proving the harassing emails came from an IP address at the ICA, where she worked. But it's my word, my evidence. Against the narrative they've already accepted. Elena nodded slowly. A strange, thoughtful look crossed her face, part anger, part calculation. Hastings and Lowe, she mused. My father hates cowardice more than anything. It was my turn to be curious. Your father? She offered a small, enigmatic smile. William Lowe. The Lowe in Hastings and Lowe. The air left my lungs. The founding partner's daughter. The heiress to the very empire that had cast me out. I took an involuntary step back. I should go. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to what? She interrupted, her smile turning warmer. Tell me the truth. Daniel, my father built that firm on the idea that facts matter. That you fight for your people. What they did to you, it violates every principle he ever espoused at the dinner table. It makes the firm he loves look weak and cynical. She reached into her small clutch, pulled out a card. It was simple, elegant. Elena Lowe, Director, Lowe Family Foundation. Have breakfast with me tomorrow. Bring your evidence. Not as a lawyer begging for a job, but as a man who was wronged, talking to someone who might know how to make it right. I took the card, my fingers trembling slightly. It wasn't hope. I felt hope was too dangerous. It was the first spark of possibility in a long, dark night. Breakfast was at a quiet, sun-drenched cafe in Back Bay. I arrived with a carefully organized file, not the emotional rant of a wounded man, but a forensic brief. Timeline exhibits, comparative text analyses, IP address logs. I was preparing for the most important meeting of my life, and my opponent was the ghost of my own former life. Elena was already there, studying a financial report. She looked up and her smile was genuine. Counselor. Ready for discovery. Over eggs and coffee, I walked her through it. I showed her the text from Chloe the night we broke up. Fine. Have your principled stand. You'll regret this. I showed her the log of the dummy email account created an hour after that text, from a computer at the ICA. I showed her the harassing emails, their psychological language lifted almost verbatim from a controversial artist's statement Chloe had curated a month prior. I showed her my own location data and work logs, proving I was in the office basement reviewing documents at the exact times I was supposedly leaving threatening voicemails from a blocked number. Elena didn't just listen, she interrogated. She asked sharp, insightful questions about firm procedure, about Richard Vale's motivations, about the partnership politics. She was, I realized, a brilliant strategist in her own right. When Dad retires, which he keeps threatening to do, the firm will go to a management committee. Richard Vale is angling for the chairmanship, she said, frowning. A messy scandal, even a fake one, would have hurt his chances. He didn't just take the path of least resistance, he took the path of personal advantage. He used you as a sacrificial lamb to burnish his own image as a decisive leader protecting the firm's culture. The analysis was chillingly accurate. So what now? I asked. I give this to you, you give it to your father, and he issues a decree. She left, a warm, rich sound. God, no. That's not how it works. He'd be furious, but he'd also see it as a family intrusion. This has to be elegant. She leaned forward. We need to reintroduce you to the firm. Not as a victim, but as an asset they were foolish to lose. And we need to expose the lie from within, so the correction is institutional, not paternal. And how do we do that? By merger, she said, her eyes gleaming. Not a corporate one. A personal one. You and me. I nearly choked on my coffee. I'm sorry. Not a real marriage proposal, she clarified, smiling. A courtship. A very public, undeniable one. Daniel, I run the family foundation. I date artists, academics, philanthropists. I have never, ever been seen with a Hastings and Lowe lawyer. The gossip alone will be seismic. People will ask, who is this guy? Why is Elena Lowe with him? The narrative shifts from disgraced associate to mystery man who won over the Lowe heiress. It creates a platform. It gets you back into the rooms you've been locked out of. It was audacious, insane, and strategically flawless. And your father will be insanely curious and protective. He'll have you investigated properly, this time. And my investigator will make sure your file is the one he sees. She reached across the table, her hand covering mine. Her touch was steady, electric. But listen, Daniel. This only works if the connection is real. I'm not asking you to pretend. I'm asking you to have dinner with me. To see if we actually like each other. The strategy is the frame. What we put inside it, that has to be genuine. Or it won't fool anyone, least of all my father. So, we began. Not a plot, but a relationship with a shared, strategic understanding. We had dinner. We talked for hours. I discovered a woman of formidable intelligence, deep compassion hidden behind a dry wit, and a quiet rebellion against the gilded cage of her name. She saw in me not a broken man, but a principled one who had been broken by a system he believed in. The chemistry wasn't a performance, it was a startling, profound discovery. We were seen. At the symphony, at gallery openings, at cozy neighborhood bistros. The legal gossip feeds, which had buried me, now buzzed with speculation. Is that Daniel Thorne with Elena Lowe? The disgraced associate frame began to crack under the weight of a more intriguing story. As Elena predicted, her father, William Lowe, summoned me. Not to his office, but to his private club, a fortress of leather and male exclusivity. He was in his 70s, with a leonine head of white hair and eyes as sharp as broken glass. Mr. Thorne, he said, not offering a hand. You've caused quite a stir. I intend no disruption, sir. Bullshit, he said mildly, sipping his bourbon. You're dating my daughter. That's a disruptive act by definition. Who are you, and what are your intentions? It was my moment. I didn't plead. I didn't show the file. I answered as if I were being cross-examined by a master. I am the man your firm fired without a hearing based on fabricated evidence. My intention with Elena is separate and sincere. But my intention regarding Hastings and Lowe is to see its honor restored, because its failure to seek the truth betrayed the principles you taught her to value. He studied me for a long, silent minute. You have proof of these fabrications. I do. And you haven't gone to the media? Or filed a suit? Elena advised against it. She said you valued solving problems within the family. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. She knows me too well. He extended a hand, Palm up. Give it to me. All of it? I handed him the file. He spent the next hour reading it, his expression growing stormier with each page. When he finished, he closed the folder with a definitive slap. Richard Vale, he growled. A coward and an opportunist. And this Whitaker woman, a sociopath with a curator's eye. He looked at me. You understand, if I do this, it will be an earthquake. It will embarrass the firm in the short term. Sir, the firm is already embarrassed. It just doesn't know it. It traded its integrity for a quiet afternoon. That story will get out, eventually. Better it comes from you, correcting the error, than from a whistleblower or a rival firm. He nodded, his gaze appraising. You argue like a low. All right. You're reinstated. Effective immediately. Not as an associate. As a special counsel reporting directly to me, overseeing ethics and compliance review. Your first assignment, clean up this mess. Then, we'll talk about where you belong. It was more than I dreamed of. A promotion, a mandate, and the direct backing of the founding partner. The reinstatement email went firm-wide, stating that new evidence had come to light exonerating me completely, and that a comprehensive review of the matter and the firm's procedures was underway. The earthquake began. My return to Hastings and Lowe was not a quiet affair. William Lowe walked me onto the M&A floor himself, his hand on my shoulder. The silence was absolute, broken only by the distant ring of a phone. Richard Vale, emerging from his office, turned the color of old parchment. I merely nodded at him. Richard, I'll need all your communications related to my termination. The real ones. By noon. My new office was larger than my old one, with a view that included the Commons bench where I'd hit bottom. My first act was to formally deliver the evidence to the firm's internal investigation committee, now chaired by an outside retired Judge Lowe brought in. The second was to file a defamation lawsuit against Chloe Whitaker. Not for money, initially, but for a public retraction and an admission of facts. The machinery of truth, once engaged, was relentless. Faced with the forensic evidence, Chloe's lawyer advised her to settle. The terms were brutal, a full, signed confession detailing her fabrication, to be published as a legal notice in the Boston Globe and the American Lawyer, payment of my legal fees, and a substantial financial settlement to be donated to a charity supporting victims of actual harassment. She fought it, but when the judge reviewed my evidence in a pre-trial hearing, he all but laughed her defense out of court. Her career at the ICA ended that afternoon. The art world, which loved drama but hated fraud, closed its doors to her. Within Hastings and Lowe, the fallout was swift. Richard Vale was permitted to retire early. The HR head who had rubber-stamped my dismissal was reassigned. A new, rigorous protocol for investigating internal complaints was instituted, with external oversight. The firm's public apology to me was unprecedented, a full-page ad in the same journals that had carried the gossip, stating they had failed their own standards and were committed to doing better. Through it all, Elena was my anchor and my co-strategist. Our merger of convenience had become the central fact of my life. One evening, 6 months after my reinstatement, in the garden of her father's estate, William Lowe grilled steaks while Elena and I set the table. "You've done good work, Daniel," he said, poking at the fire. "The partners respect you. They're afraid of you, which is better. What do you want?" "A partnership." Head of the new compliance division. I looked at Elena, who smiled, nodding slightly. I took a breath. "I want to marry your daughter, sir. With your blessing. And after that, we can discuss partnership." William Lowe stared at me, then at Elena, then burst into a great, roaring laugh that echoed in the twilight. "You negotiate like a Lowe, too. The blessing you have. The partnership, we'll see." He raised his beer bottle. "To the merger." Our wedding was at the Boston Public Library, a triumphant, public affair that was the final nail in the coffin of the old narrative. I was no longer the guy who was fired. I was Daniel Thorne, the man who married Elena Lowe, the special counsel who cleaned up Hastings and Lowe, the partner-elect. The offer came the week after the honeymoon. The past was not erased. The scar of that betrayal, and the firm's cowardice, remained. But it had been cauterized by truth and consequence. Chloe was a footnote, a warning tale. Richard Vail was a ghost playing golf in Florida. I stood at the window of my new corner office, a partner's office, looking out at the city. Elena came up behind me, slipping her arms around my waist. "Penny for your thoughts, Mr. Thornlow," she murmured. I covered her hands with mine. "I was just thinking," I said, "about precedent. They established one, that lies could break me. We established a new one, that the truth can rebuild something even stronger." She rested her head against my back. "And what's the holding of this new case?" I turned and kissed her, the city lights spreading out behind us like a field of stars we'd fought to reclaim. "The holding," I said softly, "is that sometimes, getting everything you ever wanted starts with losing it all to the wrong person, so you can find the right one to win it back with."